Ladies and gentlemen in attendance, boxing fans joining us around the world, it's showtime!
Las Vegas was as busy as ever on the evening of September 7th, 1996. Celebrities piled in to see Mike Tyson take on Bruce Seldon in the boxing event of the year.
America was asking big questions about the talents of Tyson, and Tyson really could not have answered them in a more emphatic manner.
Among those, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight of Death Row Records. A swift victory from Mike Tyson ensured an early start to the night for Shakur. However, things took a turn. One of the younger Death Row members present, Trayvon Lane, coincidentally spotted a rival gang member named Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand. He informed Tupac and the rest of the Death Row entourage. Tupac immediately approached Anderson and struck him, before the rest of Death Row jumped in. The fight, which was caught on CCTV, was broken up by the hotel security. After which, Shakur, Knight, and the rest of the Death Row entourage promptly exited the MGM Grand and returned to the Luxor Hotel and Suge Knight's house, respectively. None of Shakur's group was stopped or questioned by the security. They simply left the premises. Whilst Knight would later be imprisoned for his role in this altercation and it violating his parole, at the time, no report was filed by Las Vegas police. Despite the brawl in the MGM Grand, they continued with their plans to travel to Suge Knight's now-closed Club 662 on Flamingo Road, where they were scheduled for a charity concert. However, they would never make it.
Gangster rap star Tupac Shakur, 5-year-old rapper, was in the backseat of a black BMW.
He has multiple gunshot wounds to the chest.
Las Vegas police say shots were fired from a passing white Cadillac.
Shakur and Knight drove a 1996 BMW 7 Series, leading a convoy of vehicles down Las Vegas Boulevard South, where they were intercepted by a white Cadillac.
Pretty far down the street when it happened. We didn't know if we heard gunshots, or we didn't really know exactly what we heard. We heard a lot of screaming, a lot of cars screeching.
From this Cadillac, an assailant reached out the window and fired a semi-automatic firearm at the car.
We ran up the street as cops were running past us, and by the time we got here, they were already taking, which now I found out was Tupac, into the helicopter away. He had been shot.
A total of 14 rounds were fired at the car, fatally injuring Tupac Shakur. They were rushed to University Medical Center, where 6 days later, Shakur is pronounced dead.
Rapper Tupac Shakur had
Proceeded to commit homicide.
Don't get it twisted. This is not
Investigations are ongoing.
Let him up, let him up.
I,
He's
in
with
fact,
us.
interviewed you after sure that night.
We were told not to bring our weapons.
Get back, get back. Get back.
This is not how real life is supposed to be.
Born June 16, 1971, in East Harlem, New York. Laysan Parish Crooks was renamed just before his first birthday after Tupac Amaru, an 18th century South American revolutionary who was executed after leading an uprising against Spanish rule.
Tupac, it means determined to overcome my obstacles.
A fitting name for the child of Afeni Shakur and Billy Garland, who were both revolutionaries themselves, being active members of the Black Panther Party in New York. For Tupac, the message was clear from the start. Something had to change.
So when the Panthers hit, the government panicked, and they had a thing called a COINTELPRO, and they felt like the Panthers were detrimental to American society, so they raided every Panthers house, especially the ones who they felt like could do the most damage as an orator. So my mother was 9 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant. They put a match to the door and said, "Fire, fire." And it's like 5 in the morning, so my mother opened the door and they just burst in, put a shotgun to her pregnant belly and put a gun to her head and said, "Don't move, it's just you're under arrest." all of my roots to the struggle are real deep.
In America, black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized. The police in our community occupy our area, our community, as a foreign troop occupies territory. And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us.
Afeni was actually on trial when she was pregnant with Tupac as part of the Panther 21 criminal case. In New York, 2 police stations and an education office were the targets of planned, synchronized bombings and rifle attacks. A total of 21 Black Panthers were detained. The trial ultimately came to an end with all 21 defendants acquitted of all charges. Just a month after Afeni was set free, Tupac Shakur was born. In the early days, Tupac had a rocky relationship with his mother. Her commitment to the Panthers left little time for her to be a mother. She was constantly delivering speeches, touring campuses, and attending demonstrations. It always seemed like she cared more about the people than her people, he claimed. From a child, he observed the brutal reality of existence for so many people, and his music would go on to reflect this.
So you were right in the middle of the storm.
I'm still in the storm. I'm still in the storm. As a matter of fact, my mother was in a book. There's a book about my mother called Look for Me in the Whirlwind, and I like to think that's my motto.
They would eventually end up leaving New York behind for life in Baltimore, Maryland, when Afeni lost her job. After 2 years there, Tupac found a place at Baltimore School of the Arts, where he was able to pursue his childhood dream of acting. He appeared in a Shakespeare play and even did ballet dancing. It was also here that he was exposed to an eclectic range of music. He cited artists like U2, Sinead O'Connor, and Kate Bush as some of his favorites.
Was this always kind of an ambition of yours? Did you have the show business bug as a youngster?
I mean, I caught it then, but at the time, it just seemed like the fun thing to do, because I was 13, but I caught the bug when I got on stage and all those people was clapping, so that's when I got it. But really, I just enjoy expressing myself. Anytime I can express myself, I can let some of the pain go from a childhood like mine, so that's why I enjoy acting.
In 1988, Afeni sent Tupac to Marin City in California, just north of San Francisco. She organized for a fellow Panther to look after Tupac and his sister Setua while she stayed in Baltimore to save for the means to get herself to California. Afeni would eventually join her children in Marin City, but she unfortunately brought tragedy with her.
You're not going to be able to sell any more drugs over in this neighborhood. You're not going to be able to sell any more drugs in this neighborhood.
This has reached epidemic proportions.
It is a crack epidemic, which police say is causing an increase in murder and other violent crime. An epidemic with no end in sight.
Afeni had begun using crack in Baltimore, and the move to California only exacerbated it further. She had succumbed to crack addiction. The situation with his mother got so dire that Tupac would eventually leave home to live with friends. He reportedly began selling crack as a way to afford food, but it didn't last long, nor did it come at the cost of his education.
Dealers beware. Crack 101 is now ready for action, complete with 4 crack-sniffing dogs aimed at breaking up the small kitchen labs where crack is made.
In fact, his grades never slipped. He continued to flourish instead. In the spring of 1989, he was attending poetry lessons in Oakland Park from Lila Steinberg, who he formed a close friendship with. Tupac's love of Shakespeare had given him the markings of a fine storyteller and performer, and he had been obsessively writing poetry. He convinced Steinberg, who had no industry experience, to become his manager. She was able to get Tupac in a room with music manager Afeni Shakur, who helped him land a position as a roadie and backup dancer for hip-hop group Digital Underground. It wasn't long before he stepped up to the mic. Tupac's musical debut was on Same Song by Digital Underground. The song soundtracked the Dan Aykroyd film Nothing But Trouble. Digital Underground would once again recruit Tupac for their album Sons of the P that October. And after seeing his potential, Afeni Shakur became Tupac's manager. In a stroke of luck, a new label named Interscope was on the lookout for up-and-coming hip-hop talent. And when Gregory brought Tupac to them, the name was flagged by Interscope owner Ted Field's daughter, who had heard his demo and loved it. And so, in 1991, Tupac would sign his first record deal with Interscope, releasing his debut solo album, Tupacalypse Now, just a month after Sons of the P hit stores. Arguably his most politically charged body of work, Tupacalypse Now didn't host any major hits, but was well received all the same, selling a respectable 500,000 copies. The project established Tupac as an unflinching voice for Black people in America. Even at such an early stage in his career, he was using his skill as a lyricist to change the conversation and bring hip-hop back down to earth. In an interview with Chuck Phillips, he says, "Everything in life is not all beautiful. To me, a perfect album talks about the hard stuff and the fun and caring stuff." Word of his success reached Afeni in 1991, which helped push her to break free of her drug addiction, which she did before moving back to New York, where the two would later reconcile.
Brenda's got a baby, but Brenda's barely got a brain. A damn shame, the girl can hardly spell her name. That's not our problem.
Unfortunately for Tupac, the album's reception was not all positive. Tracks like Brenda's Got a Baby and Soldier's Story were met with some backlash. In 1991, teenage car thief Ronald Ray Howard shot and killed a police officer and directly cited Soldier's Story as motivation. The song, which depicts the story of someone blasting and dropping a police officer, was condemned by Vice President Dan Quayle. Quayle stated, "There is absolutely no reason for a record like this to be published. It has no place in our society." Tupacalypse Now's release began the whirlwind of controversy and trouble for the artist. From 1992 to 1994, he was involved in numerous incidents involving the police, including a firearm of his being used in the accidental murder of a 6-year-old and him shooting 2 off-duty police officers. He didn't go to jail, however, until 1994, when he served a 15-day sentence for assaulting film director Alan Hughes and bragged about it on MTV.
I beat up the directors, the ministers aside. Let me tell the whole world. All right, tell them why you did with that. These chump, punk, slump, you know.
Hey, look, you'll have a chance to come here and rebuttal.
No, they won't. They better come now. Check this out. They fired me, but did it in a roundabout punk snitch way. So I caught them on the streets and beat they behind. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
I was a menace to the youth, brothers. And it ain't over.
The assault came after Hughes fired Tupac from the set of Menace to Society. He was facing a much more serious charge in 1995, when he was on trial for sexual assault. Now, back in New York, a woman alleged that Tupac, along with others, had sexually assaulted her in Tupac's suite in the New York Parker Meridian Hotel in November 1993.
Hi, Tupac. How you doing? Can you tell me how you doing today?
Well, I just had to listen to the prosecution's closing argument, and it was just so far from the truth that it really just has me drained at the end of the day. But I'm leaving it in the hands of the jury. I'm learning a lot about people's innermost fears in this trial, because it's not even about my trial no more. It's just about loud rap music tattoo having thugs. It's not even about me no more. It's about, you know, some nightmare that these people having.
She was talking about thug life and all that, trying to...
He's definitely guilty. Anybody with thug life tattooed on their stomach is guilty. What type of reasoning is that? You know what I'm saying? We got different backgrounds. We come from two different places. Just because I look different than her doesn't mean that I'm a sodomizer or a raper. They've said it in the... I can't understand why it's this close. They talking about there's no evidence that I ever sodomized her, even though you put that all over the paper. And every time they take a quote out of this courtroom, they take a quote from out of her mouth, which is, you know, the stuff to put me in jail. It's nothing that's been true. I just want print the facts so everybody can sort it out. My life is ruined because nobody has a chance to get the facts.
And the fact is that there was no semen found.
No semen found, no forcible entry, no entry into the anal, no nothing, none of that, you know.
And no fingerprints on the gun.
No fingerprints on the guns, you know what I'm saying? The only time ever there was an act of sodomy, she admitted she did it to me. I should be, you know, putting charges on this girl who sodomized me on the floor of a dance club. Why am I in court? You know what I'm saying? Get my life ripped apart. But I'm here, I'm gonna go through it just to show that I have faith in the American system. But for me to have faith in the American system, these juries and everybody else has to, you know what I'm saying, play the same role and to keep an open mind. I'm already convicted. My whole life has been turned around. I lost every job, I lost everything, every opportunity. I can't get buy cars, can't get rent, can't get none of that. But I'm still a survivor, you know, I'm still coming to court, still smiling, still signing autographs. But soon I'm gonna go crazy, you know what I'm saying? And it's up to the world, you know, America eats its babies. No matter what y'all think about me, I'm still your child, you know what I'm saying? You can't just turn me off like that. This is all about my image. This has nothing to do with me. This is all about my image. It's like MTV, all the papers, they building me up. Now they destroying me on the same image that they perpetuated. You know what I'm saying? I'm selling records. This is what I do for a living. I'm selling records. Don't get it twisted. This is not my real life. This is not how my real life is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be really having all these villains in my life.
He stood trial for the crime, but the day before the verdict would be announced, Tupac was attacked.
Shakur was apparently attacked by robbers as he and 3 other men arrived at a New York City recording studio early this morning. A man identified as Shakur's manager was also wounded. Shakur and his road manager are currently on trial on sex abuse charges.
He was called to Quad Recordings in Manhattan on the evening of the 30th of November when he was ambushed in the lobby. He was shot 5 times, twice in the head, twice in the groin, and most notably, a final shot pierced his hand and struck an artery in his thigh. He survived the attack, but he began to suspect that his East Coast companions were not as trustworthy as he once thought. Tupac claimed that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, was behind his attack. He also implicated Christopher Biggie Smalls Wallace, Andre Harrell, and Tupac's close friend and associate, Randy Stretch Walker. Biggie Smalls claims that they did not know Tupac would be arriving at the studio, and when they heard he had arrived, they sent Little C's downstairs to collect him. He instead returned with the news that Tupac had been shot, and when the rest of Biggie's entourage went to investigate, he was on a stretcher, being taken to Bellevue Hospital, reportedly giving the finger to those around him.
From Tupac's perspective, he said nobody would look him in the eye, and that the people that were upstairs must have known that he was going to be ambushed and robbed. And so he basically accused all the people in that room of being a part of the conspiracy.
He come on, look around, took up the middle finger, put him in the ambulance, and we were just curious, like, what was that supposed to mean? Like, was that middle finger to us?
Despite his physical condition, his verdict was still read, and whilst he was acquitted of both his gun and sodomy charges, he was convicted of sexual assault and sentenced to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison.
I'm not guilty. People should look me in my eyes. They should look me in my eyes. Anybody that thinks I committed that rape should go get Brenda's Got a Baby and keep your head up and listen to him thoroughly. I have no patience for anybody to douse me. None at all. It's too hard out here. You know what I'm saying? If my people don't stand up for me, who is? I understand these white folks looking at me like that because they don't know me. They didn't hear keep your head up. That ain't no fluke. You know, keep your head up ain't no goddamn come up. I didn't do that for to be smiling in my face to say, oh, he's cool. I did that from my heart. So that if they do try to put a rape charge on me, my sisters could say he ain't about that. Now, if my sisters can't say that, you won't hear another
keep your head up out my mouth.
During his prison time, he released his aptly named third studio album, Me Against the World. It reached #1 on the Billboard 200 chart and is considered by many to be his greatest body of work. The lead single, Dear Mama, helped distance Tupac from the ceilings of gangster rap and continued his ongoing legacy of social commentary through poetry-style lyrics. He would only end up serving 11 months of his sentence, however, as in October, Suge Knight struck a deal with Tupac and paid his hefty $1.4 million bail, soon after signing him to his West Coast record label, Death Row Records. Tupac made the move back to the West Coast, and with his freedom came his greatest commercial success, All Eyes on Me.
Hank, those up, big yeah. Y'all know how this shit go, you know. All eyes on me, motherfucker.
Death Row facilitated Tupac's momentous comeback and elevated his success even further. It was just a glimpse of what he might achieve as a rap superstar.
When he turned the corner, there was this guy standing there. Little did I know who he was. He ran up to him and he swung. And then the guy swung back, and then Pac weaved, and then Pac swung again. And at this time, there was like 3 or 4 blows thrown. Tupac had this medallion on that he had recently purchased, and it broke. When it broke, he went down to pick it up. When he went down to pick it up, I grabbed him. When I grabbed him, I threw him against the wall, so I had him out of the fight. At this time, everyone else is running up, as clearly the MGM footage shows. The guy is Orlando Anderson, now that we know who he is.
Orlando Anderson, the victim of the MGM Grand fight, was a member of the Southside Compton Crips. It's unknown as to why he was alone in the MGM Grand Hotel area on the evening of September 6, 1996. Anderson was significantly beaten by the 5 members, but did not sustain any serious injury. He can be seen on CCTV afterwards speaking with both LVMPD and security officers. He was standing and seemed uninjured. The security offered him first aid and the opportunity to file a formal complaint. He declined both. When Anderson was questioned regarding his visit to Las Vegas, his answers were inconsistent, stating once that he was in town to see the Tyson versus Selden fight, and on another occasion that he was simply in Las Vegas to gamble with his girlfriend. He had not purchased tickets for the Tyson versus Selden fight, nor was he in possession of the estimated amount of legal tender required to purchase a scalper ticket at late notice. When questioned by the LA Times, Anderson's family seemed to support his claim of being in Las Vegas just for innocent fun. They also claim he had no affiliation with the Southside Compton Crips. Las Vegas police considered Anderson a suspect and interviewed him once, very briefly, where he was unable to provide a sufficient alibi for 11:15 p.m. PDT, September 7, 1996, the time of the shooting. However, the general consensus from Detective B. Baker was that no one they spoke to following the shooting was willing to cooperate with the police, outside of civilian witness testimonies from the Las Vegas Strip at the time of the shooting. Anderson was arrested 1 month later as part of an unrelated investigation. Las Vegas police eventually discounted Anderson as a suspect to the death of Tupac, citing the short time between the hotel assault and the shooting.
Yesterday, the Reverend Jesse Jackson arrived and said a prayer at Shakur's bedside. He remains in the intensive care unit at University Medical Center in Las Vegas.
Roughly 3 hours elapsed between the altercation involving Anderson and the shooting on Las Vegas Boulevard South. A subsequent investigation places the following people at the scene of the crime. The black BMW, containing both Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. To their left, Trayvon. Behind, Frank Alexander, along with the Outlaws. Despite the elusive nature of the LVMPD's investigation, they would later produce the following estimation of the passengers in the white Cadillac from which the shots were fired, including Terrence T. Brown, DeAndre Dre Smith, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, and notably Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. There are a number of conspiracies stemming from these names. Having also been partial victim of the shooting, Suge Knight was the ideal witness to identify the suspect who fatally shot Tupac. After the shooting took place, Knight was able to continue to drive the BMW a mile to Las Vegas Boulevard and Harmon Avenue, where they were pulled over by Bike Patrol Officer Chris Carroll, who alerted paramedics.
They had Suge out of the vehicle on the ground, and as I was approaching him, the blood was shooting up out of his head. So I'm yelling, let him up, let him up. He's with us. He was part of the entourage. And when they let him up, Tupac is still sitting in the passenger seat. The door is still closed. So Suge says, I can do it, it's my car, I'll open it. The door was actually stuck. So Suge got over there, opened the door, and we pulled Pac out of the car. When we pulled him out of the car, we lined him down on the side of the car, and I'm kneeling down at this time, and I'm talking to him like, Pac, man, Pac. And he's like, he's trying to breathe. And then he goes, I can't breathe.
Police and paramedics took the pair to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. The severity of Tupac's injuries meant he was taken to the intensive care unit, whereas Suge Knight was admitted to the General Hospital. Knight sustained a head injury from bullet fragmentation inside the vehicle, but was not directly shot by the assailant. Knight was treated at University Medical Center and stayed there overnight. However, when Las Vegas detectives arrived to speak with him, they were denied access by his legal representation. When they returned the next day to interview him, he was gone, having been discharged that same morning. Despite Knight owning a property and living in Las Vegas at the time, the Las Vegas police made no attempt to visit Knight to interview him regarding the events of the shooting. They instead continued via his attorney, attempting to organize a time through them, which took days. Las Vegas police claim they were able to speak with Suge Knight 3 days after the shooting, but other sources claim it may have been up to 7 days. When they did finally meet, it's reported they only interviewed Knight for some 30 to 45 minutes, which seems unusual considering both his proximity and relation to the crime. Also in close proximity to the shooting was Yafu Gaddafi Fula, member of death row and rap group Outlaws. He was riding in the vehicle directly behind Tupac's BMW, along with Tupac's personal bodyguard Frank Alexander and fellow Outlaws member Edi Amin. Gaddafi allegedly claimed to be able to identify the assailant. However, he initially refused to cooperate with Las Vegas police.
I, in fact, interviewed Yafu Fula that night. Again, he wasn't real happy about sitting there talking to me.
After Tupac's death, Gaddafi left Las Vegas and traveled to Los Angeles, Atlanta, and then finally settling in New Jersey with relatives. Because the victims of the shooting were not locals and instead residents of the Compton, Los Angeles area, the investigation expanded to include the cooperation of the Compton Police Department. Compton detectives assembled a file of gang member mugshots and delivered them to the Las Vegas Police Department for potential identification. Anderson was among those pictured. Las Vegas detectives then attempted to make contact with Gaddafi's legal representation so that he could be shown the mugshots. However, according to Sergeant Kevin Manning, who headed the investigation, his calls were never returned. No attempt was made by the police to locate Gaddafi, who was subsequently murdered on November 10, 1996, before the police were able to follow up with him. In a report by the Times in early 1997, both Mean and Alexander denied ever being asked by Las Vegas police to view said photographs, despite having been in a similar position to Gaddafi at the time of the shooting. Mean claimed to have seen all 4 men in the vehicle. Alexander even stated he had seen the face of the suspect who fired the gun. However, later that year, when Alexander was involved in an interview conducted by the Las Vegas police, he was shown a series of 8 photo lineups, but failed to identify anyone from them. He also went back on his previous statement, saying he had only seen the occupants of the car in more of a profile. Ultimately, the pair's accounts of the events that took place disputed heavily, and Las Vegas police could not draw any conclusions from them. It's worth noting that in the wake of the shooting, Frank Alexander met with Suge Knight multiple times before either of them spoke to the LVPD detectives or police. Once on September 8th, where Alexander received a call from Death Row asking him to meet with Suge. They allegedly spoke about the events of the shooting in private.
I was in my hotel room. I got a phone call from Reggie telling me to come over to Suge's house. Suge, eventually called me into his office at his house, and he goes, "Frank, I want to talk to you." I go into the office with him, and we're talking, and he goes, "Frank, what happened?" That was our conversation, and we just basically went over everything that had happened, how it happened, and what I had seen, and what he knew, and the events. We reacted the events with one another in private.
Then again on the 12th. Then finally on the 13th, when the news of Tupac's decline had become known. Alexander was allegedly questioned about the security issues in retrospect. Alexander described Suge Knight as being extremely angry, the polar opposite of their meeting the previous evening.
Suge is asking me all kind of questions about what happened, security, and then all of a sudden the phone rings. Right? Suge gets the phone, he had the phone, he answers the phone, and he stands up, and he throws the phone. Bang! Right across the table, right? He turns around, and he says, "Can nobody fucking save him now?" And he's in tears, right? And he goes, "He just died." And I just start crying, right? As I'm crying, and I'm just like, Suge walks away, everybody at the table just gets up, and everybody walks away. Reggie looks at me and he goes, "Go pack your shit, get out of Vegas." I'm thinking, why?
It's a cold, cold day in the rap, hip-hop music world. In case you haven't heard, it's been all over the media, all over the news, all over the radio. Rapper Tupac Shakur has passed away.
I would like to say condolences to Tupac's family. I think he was a great person. I learned a lot about him by reading about him and everything, and he did a lot of good stuff for his community.
Let's go for another one, high KCEP.
A lot of our young brothers out there would start to get along a little bit better and stop coming up with your
My fucking lady's gonna die here, and you're telling me about some fucking numbers? If I knew this shit, I'd have wrote it down.
In 1996, Tupac was shooting the film Gridlocked alongside co-star Tim Roth. Frank Alexander and Kevin Hackey were both working security on set. A week or so before the film wrapped, Alexander received a call from Yasmin Fula, Yaki Gaddafi's mother. She explained that Tupac had called an audit of Death Row Records, claiming he was owed millions of dollars in royalties. He had fulfilled his obligation to Death Row and allegedly wanted out. According to Tracy Robinson, he was done, and Tupac had no intentions of renewing any sort of agreement. Suge Knight was notified of Tupac's plans on September 4th, 1996, and David Kenner, Death Row's attorney, was in turn notified 2 days later, the day prior to Tupac's murder. Reggie Wright Jr. was one of the few people who claimed Tupac Shakur would never leave death row. He also states that if he did, it would not be in Knight's interest to have him killed. He stated that Knight and death row were still responsible for his bail. If they were unhappy with him, he alleges they would likely revoke it and institutionalize Tupac in the hopes that it would humble him a bit. However, Knight knew better than anyone that even behind bars, Tupac was a voice that was not easily dampened. He was a deeply distrusting person, judging by how he responded to the Quad Recordings incident. And if he suspected foul play on death row's part, their whole relationship would be in jeopardy. Could it be that Suge Knight ordered Tupac's death to avoid both the royalty discrepancies as well as the potential fallout from intimidating him? Suge Knight was known for his harsh, strong-arm tactics. He was allegedly not scared to threaten serious harm or even death to people that stood in his way. Despite denying any claims he has used force to get what he wants from people, there are simply too many similar accusations to ignore, including him attacking Eazy-E over the release of Dr. Dre from Relentless Records, and sending personal threats to Straight Outta Compton director F. Gary Gray. The suggestions that Knight would resort to violence in order to keep a hold of Tupac's music were not exactly out of character. However, many see this theory as largely illogical due to the fact that Knight was also in the car at the time of the shooting. If he really wanted Tupac dead, why would he intentionally put himself in harm's way like that? Someone notably missing from the scene of the shooting was Reggie Wright Jr., death row's head of security. Wright was employed personally by Suge Knight. Wright was responsible for the security detail for Death Row and Club 662. He employed some 20-plus security guard personnel, including Kevin Hackey, Ken Archer, Kevin Gaines, Michael Moore, and Frank Alexander, the majority of whom were working the night of Tupac's murder. Much to the confusion of the security team, Wright demanded that on the evening of the 7th, no security were to carry weapons of any kind.
That day, we were told not to bring our weapons into the club after the fight, not to have our weapons on our person, to either leave them in our hotel room or to leave them in our vehicles.
Has there ever been a situation where you were told to leave your weapon prior to this?
We were never told prior to September the 7th to leave our weapons anywhere other than the fact if we were going out of the state of California.
In a recent interview, Wright explained he did this in order to prioritize the safety of the thousands of people inside Club 662. He claimed to have designated armed security in the club, and that if there were lots of firearms present in such a small area, the potential risks were too dire. Michael Moore explained that in the security meeting, he protested this decision and repeatedly asked Wright for a reason for this request. After Wright failed to provide him with one, he refused to disarm himself for the night of the 7th. Moore was usually positioned with Alexander as a personal bodyguard to Tupac. However, on this occasion, Wright requested Moore leave Tupac and Alexander to instead work security at Club 662, leaving Alexander alone with Tupac unarmed. When interviewed later regarding Wright, Moore explained, "During no part of that day did I take my weapon off." He alleged that it was this that caused Wright to remove him off Tupac so that there wouldn't be a weapon there.
Al Giddens, who was the supervisor now for security at this point, Al Giddens told Michael Moore to, fuck that. You go and come to the club. And he was like, well, Tupac told me to come over to the MGM. He was like, no, we need you over here. You get over here. So Mike went over to the club. So I was the only one left with Pac.
Wright also failed to provide Alexander or Moore with a radio that night, citing Hackey as the reason. saying he was in possession of their radios and he refused to come to Las Vegas. After the incident with Orlando Anderson, Alexander escorted the death row party out of the MGM Grand, and when they reached the Luxor Hotel, he had to go to his vehicle to retrieve his firearm. Another claim alleges the team were disarmed for another reason. Nevada law requires that out-of-state security need to obtain a concealed weapon permit in advance. Upon the team's arrival into Las Vegas, they were informed that no attempt was made by Wright Security to file for this permit, and thus no one was legally allowed to arm themselves during the trip. Whilst it's difficult to know which one of these accounts is true, both lead to gross negligence on Wright's behalf. The fact remains that the security were unarmed, and as a result, the people they were there to protect suffered. With so many discrepancies in the security accounts and the integrity of Wright's company in question, it's not difficult to suspect foul play on his behalf. The motive, however, is much less clear. If Wright did order the death of Tupac and intentionally compromised his own security team, he would need to have an airtight reason to do so. Wright had no serious reason to want Tupac dead. He did, however, stand to gain a significant amount from Suge Knight's demise, which poses a different question. Was Tupac collateral damage in a plot by Reggie Wright Jr. to kill Suge Knight? At this time, Death Row was an independent music behemoth, generating a reported $100 million annually in its heyday. It was almost unavoidable that Knight could see himself become a target. In 2015, LAPD detective Russell Poole told news platform Vice that he strongly believed Wright Jr. was behind the murder. He also implicates Sharitha Golden, Suge Knight's ex-wife. They were in the process of a hefty divorce, and should something happen to Suge during that time, she would have likely got most of everything he owned, including Death Row. He alleges that Sharitha approached Wright, who was notably in charge of Death Row while Suge was in prison, with the proposition of a coup of the record label. Wright is still denying these allegations today. Regardless of that, some simply don't believe this theory adds up. A total of 14 rounds were fired at the BMW, 4 of which struck Tupac, another fragmented and hit Suge Knight in the back of the head. Considering the proximity in which the rounds were fired, if the assassins were indeed aiming for Knight, they were extremely unlucky not to directly hit him even once. Being that the organizer was the head of security for the victims, if this was an attempt on Suge Knight's life, it was an extremely poor one. When Biggie Smalls prepared his first album, Ready to Die, he was worried about Bad Boy as a record label and complained that things weren't happening quickly enough. He saw Tupac's success and proposed that he instead should become his manager. Tupac declined and convinced him to remain within Bad Boy Records, saying Diddy would make him a star. The Quad Recordings incident spelled an end for the pair, however. Tupac was so convinced that Jimmy Henchman, Haitian Jack, and Biggie Smalls had set him up. He said, "My closest friends did me in." Diddy publicly responded to Tupac in an interview with Vibe magazine. He overtly denied that he set up Tupac, but he claimed that Tupac knew who had shot him and was trying to use himself and Wallace as scapegoats because he wasn't man enough to face his real attackers.
Hold on, never, ever, ever has it been where motherfucking it was an East Coast, West Coast beef. This is bullshit. Y'all keep talking about it.
As Tupac was convicted and began serving his sentence, the East Coast versus West Coast conflict was just firing up. And in 1995, the two groups would meet in New York at the Source Awards. Knight flew a huge death row entourage out to New York, and when they went up to accept their awards, they were booed by the crowd. Suge Knight was unfazed and famously used his time on stage to take shots at the Bad Boy crew, and particularly Diddy.
I'd like to tell Tupac, keep his guards up. We ride with him. And one other thing I'd like to say, any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing, come to Death Row.
Diddy chose not to respond to this with angst, and instead said, "Contrary to what other people may feel, I'm very proud of Dr. Dre, of Death Row, and Suge Knight in their accomplishments. All this East and West, that needs to stop." In an attempt to preempt the serious retaliation that the Bad Boy crew wanted, Diddy confronted Suge, who insisted that he was instead talking about Jermaine Dupri of So-So Def Recording. Despite this, it was clear that Suge had his sights set on Bad Boy. Suge was determined to be solely in charge of the urban space and be able to sign any new artists, East or West Coast, with complete impunity. Things were exacerbated further when an altercation at a club in Atlanta between Suge and Diddy left one of Suge's closest friends, Big Jake, dead. Suge unwaveringly laid the death at Diddy's feet. In his mind, first blood had been spilled.
They got caught up in the hype, and it's a shame because you ain't supposed to go out like that.
The East versus West rivalry was already rife, but the signing of Tupac brought an even more personal edge. His history with New York, and specifically Biggie and Diddy, escalated the conflict further. To add to this, Tupac was enraged over the release of Biggie's B-side hit, Who Shot Ya?, which he very much perceived as a diss. The track never mentions Tupac by name, and multiple associates of Wallace claim the track was recorded prior to the shooting, but he was furious all the same. When he signed to Death Row Records, it not only pushed him further into commercial success, but also represented his initiation into Suge Knight's upper echelon. It was widely speculated that not only was Death Row founded on illegal drug money, but it was also a part of an expansive money laundering operation. The label had gang affiliation intertwined with every level of it. Suge Knight himself was a well-known member of the Mob Piru Blood gang. In an interview with Vibe magazine, Tupac provoked Diddy, claiming he was gonna whoop his motherfucking ass. He took shots at Biggie, saying, "Already people can't look at Biggie and not laugh. I took every piece of his power. Anyone who tries to help them, I will destroy. Anyone who want to side with them or do a record with them, whatever, try to unify with them, I'ma destroy. I swear to God." Unfortunately, this was only the beginning. Tupac pulled no punches with Hit 'Em Up, his now infamous battle rap hit. He mentioned both Combs and Wallace by name and hired lookalikes of them for the music video. He alleges Biggie stole his style of rapping and doubled down on his comments from Vibe magazine. Whilst Biggie never responded directly, he made jabs at Tupac on Long Kiss Goodnight. Mobb Deep, who were affiliated with Bad Boy and also mentioned on Hit 'Em Up, retaliated with their 1996 track, Drop a Gem on 'Em. At the time of the Las Vegas shooting, the coastal rivalry was at an all-time high. So naturally, when Knight and Tupac were attacked, people began speculating involvement from New York. From the list of names of assailants in the white Cadillac, only one is still alive to this day. As it happens, he may just be the most important piece of the puzzle. Keefe D is a member of the Southside Compton Crips and also Orlando Anderson's uncle. His name has circulated rumors of Tupac's murder for some time, but it wasn't until 2023 when he was arrested by the FBI that the details of his involvement were truly known. In the early 90s, he befriended Eric Von Zip Martin, who was a close confidant of Diddy, and introduced the two. The two met again a few months later to discuss an Usher music video, and then again at a party. In his story, he alleges that after the death of Big Jake in Atlanta, a member of Bad Boy Records called him and said the following: "Your boy, Big CEO, he's tripping." Keef responded by requesting 40 to 50 tickets to Diddy's concerts, saying, "We'll be in there deep." From then on, anytime Bad Boy were present in the West, Keefe and a large group of Crips would accompany them, backstage, at the hotels, in the crowds. Keefe then claims he met Diddy at a club where he made him a proposition: $1 million for the murder of Big CEO and Pac. Keefe replied with, "That's not a problem. We can make that happen." Suge Knight and Keefe D actually spent some time together as teenagers, playing for the same football team. They were friends for a time, but some arguments surrounding Death Row separated the two, and when Diddy came to him, he didn't hesitate. Diddy had many problems with Knight, but his reasoning for wanting Tupac dead mainly centered around "Hit 'Em Up." The song was an embarrassing diss to his crew, and something had to be done. In Keefe D's story, he details that him and his nephew, Orlando Anderson, were in Las Vegas on the evening of September 7, 1996. After finding out what had happened to Anderson, he immediately wanted revenge on the Death Row crew. Diddy had already offered him a large sum of money to kill them both, and so they decided to take action that very same night. Keefe D then met with Zip, who gave him the Glock 40 that would eventually be used to murder Tupac. Keefe D and his crew waited at Club 662 for approximately an hour and a half. When there was no sign of Tupac or Knight, they decided to head to the Carriage House, a hotel where they had rented a few rooms. A few blocks down, they were sitting at the light when they spotted the convoy of Death Row cars come around the corner. He claims Tupac was hanging out of the window, waving at fans and girls on the strip who had spotted him. After seeing him, they pulled the Cadillac up next to the car, and Anderson emptied the clip from the back seat. After the incident, they left the Cadillac and stashed the murder weapon inside one of the wheels. Greg Kading, who was investigating the murder, says that Diddy then called Keefe D to ask if that was his doing, which he confirmed. Keefe D met with Kading and confessed on tape that Diddy had paid him for the murder. He also confirmed Anderson as the shooter. The FBI claims that Diddy came through on his promise to pay $1 million, but it never went to Keefe D. It instead went to Zip, absolving Diddy of any link to the crime. However, Zip never shared the money with Keefe. He claims everyone involved has switched on him. Now, almost 30 years on from the murder, could his lack of obligation to the people involved mean he's finally revealing the truth? Diddy has, naturally, denied the claim, stating, "This story is pure fiction and completely ridiculous." As of 2023, Keefe D is awaiting trial for one of the biggest cases in Las Vegas history. Suge Knight is still serving a manslaughter charge in R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. He seems to suggest that the FBI is looking into the wrong person. But his stance on aiding the police hasn't changed, and he neither confirmed nor denied Keefe D as the assailant. The case remains unsolved, and as more time ticks by, the truth seems more and more distant. A large majority of the people involved in the incident are now deceased or incarcerated.
Akur's heart and respiratory system simply were overtaxed by the devastating gunshot wounds he suffered in a bold ambush a week ago. Word of his death brought legions of followers. Police have yet to identify any suspects, and now Shakur has died before detectives could even try to speak to him.
Show my respect for Tupac. Brother was a good brother.
His words really give us strength to keep on moving and look forward to another day.
A lot of people touched by it, not just rap music artists or listeners or lovers, but a lot of people, older people, is touched by this. This is a sad
They came early and stayed late in Harlem, even in the rain, to remember Tupac Shakur and to promote peace in a rap world of violence.
We here to say, well, let's make a turn from the bad to the good.
Tupac's legacy lives on, however, through his music and personal message. He had a prophecy about his death. That's why I go in the studio and do 3 songs a day, get things ready. If I die, and it can't happen, if anything were to happen to me, that album's ready to go. As of today, he has sold 125 million records across his 11 studio albums and received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. His image is instantly recognizable, and his name has endured as one of hip-hop's most iconic figures.
You know, out of the love for black people. So that's how I gotta live, and that's how I have to die. And that's how my music has to be, and my acting, and my producing, and my interviews, everything has to be for the love of black people.
2 years after his death, Tupac's estate released the song Changes. Perhaps the greatest culmination of Tupac's lyrical talent and important political commentary, the song touches on racism, drugs, poverty, and the treatment of black people by police. His passion for theater and music made him a courageous and valiant figurehead for progressive hip-hop. He used his platform to echo the messages he had got from his mother at such a young age. Whilst his life was riddled with trial and controversy, it's the mighty musical talent that came off the back of that people remember him for.
You're my brother, you're my sister. That's just the way it is. Things will never be the same. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah.
Some things will never change.